Hello everyone! With the release of Snezhnaya, Alyosha will be the one new 4-star character being introduced in Genshin version 7.0, and he will be available to everyone for free after doing part of the Snezhnaya story quest. So how strong of a character is he, and is he worth building and using? To answer these questions, in this guide I'll be going over how Alyosha works, the best ways to build him, his potential best teams, and analyzing his overall place in the meta, while also referencing pre-release calcs from multiple different theorycrafters, including T-Seers from Mobalytics, who have a written Alyosha guide up on their website that will be updated with any new information. Alyosha is a 4-star Electro Polearm character who ascends with energy recharge. His one main role is to support specifically stellar conduct teams. However, he does not have a passive that enables the use of stellar conduct for your team, making him reliant on other characters that enable stellar conduct such as Snezhnaya, Odette, and Cryo Traveler to do so for him. His elemental skill simply does damage to an enemy and generates 5 electro particles. Holding it allows him to hit all enemies in a growing Kono AoE in front of him. All enemies hit by his skill will be marked by Hunter's Mark. When Hunter's Mark is activated, the mark will be removed from enemies and it will give an attack buff and a stellar conduct damage buff to the active character. Now to activate Hunter's Mark, you'll need to use Alyosha's Elemental Burst. It spawns a field that taunts enemies and deals AoE electro damage every 2 seconds. It also summons Alyosha's Hunting Hound, Tagarin, who attacks every 2 seconds to deal electro damage, and activates Hunter's Mark when attacking an enemy affected by Hunter's Mark, which activates Alyosha's buff. Tagarin's attacks will also heal the active character with Alyosha's A1 passive, and with his A4 passive, Alyosha's skill and burst will deal extra damage scaling with his energy recharge. He also has an exploration passive that displays nearby Snezhnaya resources on your minimap. Lastly, for talent leveling priority, prioritize leveling his skill first to increase his attack buff, then level his burst to increase his personal damage, though his damage is minor so it isn't really that important. That's everything on Alyosha's base kit, but his constellations unlock a significant portion of his power. C1 gives him 15 energy when the party triggers an electro-related reaction, reducing his ER requirements. C2 extends his burst duration, and it enables Tagarin's attacks to first apply Hunter's Mark before it hits enemies, which extends his buff duration and importantly synergizes with his C6. C3 grants 3 skill talent levels. C4 enables more healing from his burst for the lowest HP party member. C5 gives 3 burst talent levels, and lastly, C6 allows the Hunter's Mark buff to stack up to 2 times, doubling Alyosha's attack buff and stellar conduct damage buff for the on-fielder. Having 2 stacks of the buff will also give an additional 100 EM to the active character. The only constellation that matters in regards to damage gain is Alyosha's C6 because it drastically increases his buffs. His other constellations don't really give him much of a team damage increase, so Alyosha is a pretty C6 reliant character. Without his C6, Alyosha provides much less team damage to his stellar conduct teams, being similar to other modern 4-star supports with important C6s. Next, let's cover Alyosha's best build options. For weapons, you mainly just want to give him any weapon that gives energy recharge so that he can burst easily every rotation. A damage buffing weapon like a Scoffia signature can work as well. The general best polearm and the most common recommendation for him will be Favonius Lance because of its passive that grants additional energy particles for the entire team. But a similar weapon you can consider is the new Battle Pass polearm, Frost Breath, as its passive gives Alyosha attack and the other members of his party a flat amount of energy when he triggers a cryo or hydro related reaction. And stellar conduct is a cryo related reaction. It serves a similar role to Favonius Lance as it gives his teammates energy, but you have to make sure Alyosha can consistently trigger stellar conduct every rotation in the team he's in. For artifacts, he has 2 main options. The first is 4-piece Noblesse for the team attack buff after he uses his burst. This is ideal when another support on the team, commonly Odette, is holding 4-piece Furnace, the new stellar support set. But if you don't have a better holder of 4-piece Furnace on the team, then Alyosha can use it to importantly give the team 50% stellar damage bonus. But just make sure that he is able to trigger the stellar conduct reaction in his team so he can actually activate the 4-piece buff. For main stats, Hourglass can be energy recharge to ensure his burst is available, especially in content like Stygian Onslaught, or attack if you want to increase his personal damage and healing. Goblet can be electro damage to optimize his minor personal damage, or attack for increased healing. And Circlet, use a crit run, very likely crit rate, especially with Favonius Lance. For substats, he mainly wants energy recharge, crit, and attack. His energy recharge requirements depend on the weapon and the team, such as whether another electro like Yai is on the team or not. Generally, with Favonius Lance and C1, his ER requirements can range from around 110 to 150% and up, but in content like Stygian Onslaught, you may want to just build over 200 ER on him just to be safe, since optimizing for his personal damage won't make that much of a difference for the overall team. Finally, let's go over Alyosha's best team comps. Alyosha is mainly a stellar conduct support, so he is best played in stellar conduct teams, ideally with Yai and Odette, the two best offfielders for stellar conduct teams in 7.0. For instance, a Snezhnaya team with Yai, Odette, and C6 Alyosha will be one of Snezhnaya's highest DPS team comps. He's not the definitive best slot, as Escoffier, C6 Chi-Chi, and Sucrose look better for damage, but C6 Alyosha is among the best options if you can get him at C6 while also providing single target healing. Without his C6, a lot of other support options like C6 Beidou, C6 Diona, Nicole, and Shilonen will just be better for damage, but Alyosha is still fine if he's the only support you have available. If you have Odette but you don't have Yai, C6 Alyosha plus Odette is one of the current best Yai alternatives. You can use C6 Diona, C6 Beidou, or Chi-Chi to fill out the remaining slot while also providing even more healing and or shields, or if you want to maximize damage and be more offensive, you can use Escoffier or Sucrose in the remaining support slot. Now, if you have Yai but don't have Odette, or you don't have her available, you can use Cryo Traveler as a sort of quick swap DPS in stellar conduct teams, or you can use C6 Diona or Chi-Chi for another source of off-field cryo. Keep in mind that you are unlikely to have C6 Alyosha without getting at least C0 Odette. Here is a Snezhnaya team DPS comparison done by Jaxon with his assumptions, which includes some of the Snezhnaya team variations I mentioned. Feel free to pause to take a closer look. For main DPS Cryo Traveler, because of their short cooldowns, they mainly benefit from playing 15-second rotations. However, Alyosha's burst has an 18-second cooldown. He's still a usable support choice if you're willing to extend Cryo Traveler's field time to accommodate for Alyosha's 18-second burst cooldown, or you could burst every other rotation with C2 plus Alyosha, as his buff duration may be able to still be enough. So Alyosha can work with Cryo Traveler, but they have more straightforward final supports who are also very strong like Chi-Chi and Sucrose. For Stellar Conduct Sino, C6 Alyosha is one of his best final supports in a team with Yai and Odette, and C6 Alyosha with Odette and C6 Beidou can be a solid Yai-less team. But the big caveat is actually getting C6 Alyosha. Without his C6, any other suitable support will generally be a better choice. Lastly, for Stellar Conduct Wriothesley, Alyosha is a usable support for him. However, because Alyosha is a healer and Wriothesley depends on controlling his own HP himself for optimal damage, Alyosha is not ideal for Wriothesley. Other supports, especially shielders for sustain like Nicole and C6 Beidou, are much better supports for him. To conclude this Alyosha guide, here is my analysis on his place in the meta in terms of overall strength and pull value. Alyosha is a decent stellar conduct support with solid single target buffs and potent healing. However, Alyosha is pretty reliant on getting his C6 in order to be one of the best support choices for damage in stellar conduct teams, except for Wriothesley. If he doesn't have his C6, he provides significantly less damage to his teams, and even though everyone gets one Alyosha for free from the story, it is still difficult to get a newly released C6 4-star without pulling a lot on the banners he's in. But even if you manage to get Alyosha C6, he is still not the clear best support option in stellar conduct teams if you have Yai and Odette. Other final supports like C6 Chi-Chi, Escoffier, Nicole, and Sucrose are as good or better than C6 Alyosha in terms of damage. So there really isn't a point to intentionally pull for his C6 and use him unless you don't have those strong existing support options or want to use C6 Alyosha plus Odette for a Yai-less stellar conduct team. And even in those cases, it still may not be worth to commit so many pulls for his C6 unless you're planning on getting C2 Odette. And if you don't have Alyosha C6, there isn't really a good reason to use him unless you have no other available support options at all. Other 4-star supports like C6 Diona and C6 Beidou are going to be better than a non-C6 Alyosha. So ultimately, Alyosha can be a useful stellar conduct support for some accounts, but he is reliant on his C6 and other existing support options are as good or better than him, especially if you don't get a C6. And with apparently a lot more Electro characters planning to be releasing in Snezhnaya, it is very likely that his spot will be replaced by a better 5-star support in the future. That's everything I wanted to cover about Alyosha. Thanks to theorycrafters MeowTews, JaxonFiles, raulfigas, and Talah from Mobalytics for all the calcs referenced in this video and their assistance with making this guide. I hope this guide and analysis was helpful to y'all in giving you a better understanding of everything related to Alyosha. Just clicking and watching the video helps the channel out immensely, and if you want to show even more support, consider liking or sharing the video, or click the subscribe button for more Genshin guide and analysis videos in the future. Leave any questions you have in the comments, and for all of you planning on wishing, I wish you all the best of luck on your Alyosha pools.